Hey guys, Bridgie here. In this video, we're going to talk about design systems and specifically around how to structure a design system for 6, 7, and especially 8-figure companies. Since at the enterprise level, you're going to need to structure things differently than if you're working on a small project for a startup. But these are going to be really important concepts to keep in mind all throughout your journey so that you can set up a system which can then expand and scale with the company. Now let's start with the very first one, which is going to be the color sections. And by the way, this is actually a design system that I worked on for a 8-figure company. And I'm simply going to focus on the high level. I removed a lot of the branding and custom aspects to it, but you can essentially consider this that it's going to be 95% close to the structure of the original. So what you really want to focus on is the high level over here. So let's talk about colors. Colors are an essential part of any design system, as you know, since colors are going to enable the agency or company to basically have an established brand online. So you want to keep in mind all of the primary colors of the brand, all the secondary colors, tertiary, and all of the colors which aren't deeply related to the brand, but are still important colors, such as for UI states, whenever you have a positive action or positive feedback, or whenever there is an issue with the app, maybe there's a notification or some alert which needs to drive attention from the user perspective. So these are all things that you need to consider from a high level before you even start creating the tonalities. So if you have a look over here, what you can see is that we have the main brand colors, which can be 1 or 2 and up to 4 probably. But these are going to be the essential colors that are strictly related to the brand. And then we're going to have the primary colors, which are going to be not only brand related, but also UI UX related. So again, as I mentioned, positive states, we're probably going to go with green without having to reinvent the wheel. We're going to want to stick with colors that have positive associations to them in a common format in UX. And for issues or negative connotations, we're probably going to stick with tones of yellow to red. So these are all things that you need to keep in mind. And we also have other colors which we're going to use in the user interface, such as this slate tint. This can be used, for example, for dividers, for lines, for different types of sections. So these are all things which you can leverage as a asset within your design system. And only once you established these colors from a high level, then you can go on and create all the various tints and shades of the color. Since you're going to need to use them at one point or another. And there's different philosophies, if you wish, when it comes to creating the different shades. Because you could actually just use a few. So instead of having 10 as we have over here, you could even have maybe this 5 shades, and this is going to suffice in the most amount of scenarios. But what I like to do is to always keep options open, because you never know when you might need a shade or another. So by having a vast array of shades, you're going to have a lot of flexibility when it comes to using the design system. And the way that it's structured, going to simply show you in Figma, is if we select one of these fields, you can actually see over here that we have them synced up in the design system. And I'm going to create an entire video about how to sync these color styles, text styles up. And we're actually going to build a design system from scratch. But for the purpose of this video, we just want to keep it a high level. And as you can see, for each and every tint, we have different shades. And if we go all the way on the top, you're going to notice that we have also the primary colors, so that if I simply need to reference one of those primary colors, I can easily do that by simply going on the top section of my design library. But if I need a specific tint, I can simply go here below and essentially leverage one of those. So this is the base when it comes to the color. And one more note which I highly recommend is whenever you're setting up the primary colors, especially for typography, do keep in mind accessibility, and you want to create clear contrast which pass accessibility. If you have any doubts regarding that, you can simply go on Google and search for accessibility color checker, and you're going to find a whole lot of resources that are going to enable you to check the accessibility contrast ratio, especially when you're working on websites or web apps. So this is it for colors. Now let's move on to typography. So typography is another major building block in design systems. And the reason being is that we use type all the time. And this is going to essentially convey what are the fonts that you're using, and also what are the different font sizes and font weights for the most part for what can be as a base the headings and then the paragraph text, but it can be even more styles from there. So the base, as we have it structured here for the web and marketing, which essentially translates in the website side of things, is we have this main title, which is an extra, it's an extra style from the heading. It's almost like a special custom class, which we decided to use just due to the fact that in the website we needed this class, but we couldn't really justify it having it as an H1, if that makes sense, since for SEO purposes we decided to move the H1 in a strategic basic location. It's kind of hard to explain by words. It's easier to show it, but for the very most part, in 99.9% of these scenarios, you're going to focus on the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, all the way to the heading 6, and also the body text. Now the body text, we had just one in this case, but you can actually divide it up into body text large, body text medium, and body text small, so that you can have more scenarios covered. In this case, we basically were good with just the body text, so we didn't really need any more styles. But again, these are going to be the base, but you can definitely add more custom styles. Just think about the scenarios that you're gonna use in the far most amount of cases, and then try and see the patterns and fill the gaps really. And very similarly to the color styles, you can simply select any one of these headings, and you're going to have the text styles which are associated with it. Now, on top of that, you can see that we have the in-app text styles, which in this case, we structured it initially, and then we decided to move to another design file. So this is not the final, but it can be something around these lines where you simply have different text at different sizes. You don't necessarily need to go with the H1, H2, H3 approach. You can actually customize this a bit more, and it's really up to you, and due to what are the project requirements for that specific project or company that you're working on. So these are good to have as an extra, because these are going to be for the web app or maybe for the mobile app, since the typography is likely not going to match exactly in the website and in the web app as well. Usually in web apps you have smaller type, you might need some type faces which have or different fonts weight and font sizes which are different than the one displayed in the website. At least in this case that was the case, simply because it's two different type of visuals that serve two different approaches and goals, really. So this is it when it comes to the typography, and you just want to keep everything clean and neat and essentially tailored around your goals. Now I'll also add usually this section, which is the logos. Now you can really see the logos here as I blurred them, but the main concept when it comes to the logo section is to have a place where you have all of the logos in the different ways that you intend of visualizing them, and ideally with some examples of when to use this logo or that logo. And I'm thinking, for example, a company might have a icon plus text logo. Maybe the icon is colored, and you might have the black and white version of that logo, which you might want to use at the end of a letterhead or at the beginning of a letterhead, where you don't want necessarily to have the color for printing reasons, for example. Or you can decide to have just the icon logo within this part of the design system, simply because you might want to have that displayed in the mobile version, because it's taking up too much width. So you might want to accustom for the limited amount of space in that scenario. So these are kind of like the logic and the thought process that goes in the logo design section. So that's that for the logo. There isn't really like a specific guideline. It really goes on a case-by-case scenario, and you really need to think through the different scenarios and what you think is the best solution for that specific case. Now, another very important aspect which is neglected, especially from junior designers or designers who are entering the space, is the icons. And iconography can play a huge role in the brand identity. And one of the most important things to consider is the consistency. You don't want to have, for example, a app where you're using solid icons and outline icons and colored icons without a specific logic. Usually you're going to stick with one for the very most part, and then you might use the other version, which might be the solid or the outline, depending on which one was the first option in specific cases. And this is true as well also for the colored icons. This might even be hover effects, where by default you have solid, and then on hover you're going to see the colored. So you definitely don't want to mix and match these icons without logic, and you want to keep a level of consistency and stability throughout the project. So one thing that we've done in the original scenario is that we noted down some examples and some notes regarding this for developers, stakeholders, marketing team, so that they will not mess up the intended design system the way that we originally thought about it. And needless to say, all of these must be in SVG, because these days it's really not acceptable not to have scalable vector icons whenever possible, at least. So this is another major building block of any design system, and something that you want to keep at heart at all times. Now, another element which is important, I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary in the first stages of the design system, but it's definitely a great element to add whenever you can, is the spacing and the grids. Now, when it comes to the spacing, in this case, we essentially have a series of size increments that we adhere to whenever we're adding these different tokens, if you wish, to the design system and to the actual screens that we're designing. So we're trying to adhere to this spacing definition. Sometimes you can do that. Other times you might want to come up with more custom solutions. It really depends on the design that you're doing. So again, sometimes these are not rules which are written in stone and you can never touch, but this is a general guide that you should adhere to whenever you can, and then based on your specific situation, you can make your own judgment as to what is the best solution in that case. Same is true also for the grids. For example, over here we have the basic container, which is going to have the 12 column, and if I go back to the edit view and I double click on this, you're going to see that we actually have the grid for the 1608 pixels container, and you can see all of these grids for the different scenarios, different sizes, and this is something that we are trying to adhere to whenever possible. Then another element which definitely want to touch upon is the shadows, overlays, and blurs. And for the time being, I'm just going to make this not visible, the layout grid. And these are going to be a really nice touch in the design system so that you can get a level of consistency also in the shadows. So as you can see over here, you have shadow 2XL, shadow XL, shadow large, shadow medium. So depending on the amount of emphasis visually that you want to give to a element that needs a shadow, you can actually decide which shadow to use since you already have it synced in the design system. There's no thinking, everything moves fast when applying these type of effects. The same is true also for the overlay. Overlays, for example, are used all the times in models, in pop-ups, so for the background. So having an overlay system or an overlay style which you can use all the time with a high level of consistency is simply going to make the project run faster and make the branding consistent overall. And the same is true for blurs. So you don't want to reinvent the wheel each and every time you're creating a blur. So having an overlay, a blur overlay is going to help in that case as well. Now, when it comes to the components, here we have this section which is called in-file components. We are not going to really touch too much upon this because we have things like naming conventions, which these, for the most part, are totally up to you as to what you prefer to have for the naming conventions. It's definitely not something which is written in stone, but for example, over here, we decided to have to adapt this naming convention, which is domain context, component, modifier, variant, and then state. And here you have the list of these different items with some examples. So again, these are definitely something which is project, which depends on the specific project, as well as any elements. But when it comes to the actual components, what I believe is a crucial element and a very important tip is to divide these base building blocks that we just discussed in this video, and to create a separate Figma file with just the components. And all of the components which we're going to apply are going to have the style applied from the original. So for example, I can have a second document which is like this, and in this example we have the Tailwind components library. These two ideally should be synced. So I'm assuming that I'm working on a project with elements around these lines. So for example, these are the buttons of the company, and you ideally want to have this color style synced in with the core colors right here. And the same is true for all of the other components when it comes to typography, when it comes to shadows, when it comes to the icons. So these components are all going to feed from the original design foundation design system. So this file is the base for building more complex elements, which are going to be the components. And this brings us to the atom methodology or atomic design, which is going to be a topic that I'm going to discuss much more in detail in another video. We didn't really go too much in depth in it, but for the very most part, you already understood the base elements of this concept, which we're going to explore in a further video. So I hope this video was helpful. Now you have a good understanding on the high-level picture of how to structure a design system in an efficient way for enterprises and create structures which are scalable overall. And you understand what is the why behind some of these macro decisions, so that you can impress your team, stakeholders, but most importantly, create efficient and scalable solutions. My name is Pierre, and I've worked in the design industry for over a decade, and I share my experience in this YouTube channel, as well as many other social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok nowadays. And if you want to learn more, feel free to check out the other videos on my channel, and I'll see you in the very next one.